annihilated. Yeah. Worldwide.
What is going on? Thank you for tuning in to UFC, the MMA Podcast 172. We are getting up there. It is June 3rd, 2016. As always, a ton to break down. Last Sunday, we had UFC Vegas, Garbrandt versus Almeida. Cody Garbrandt thrilling the world, an underdog, and he doesn't just upset, but he knocks out Thomas Almeida. And of course, this Saturday, we have a big card, UFC 199. 2 belts on the line. Luke Rockhold and Dominic Cruz look to defend their championships. Of course, it's me and P Money going to be recapping the fight night card, previewing 199. Not too much news, but we got lots of fights to do. Let's go.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
That's right, Lenny Hart. It is the MMA Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. As always, joined by the man calling in from California on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. It's P Money. What's up, bro?
Yeah, Big J.
Yeah.
Man, we are not chilling out here anymore in Southern California. We went from beautiful to deathly hot in just a matter of days. Summer is definitely upon us this June 2nd, but that's all right though. It had to happen eventually. We had some excellent action this past weekend to break down, and there is a stacked card in happening at the Forum in Englewood this coming Saturday, July 4th. That we're going to break down. So looking forward to that as always, my man.
Yeah, UFC 199. I actually didn't think of it until now. That's right in your neck of the woods. Have you thought about going, or ticket prices high? You probably have work, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you know what? Really the thing was with UFC Fight Week coming up. I mean, even though this is right in my backyard, essentially, and I was lucky enough to go to that venue as media for Glory Kickboxing, I've got my eyes on the prize being Fight Week this year. Really going to try and do the 7th, 8th, and 9th out there in Vegas and do it properly. So I really wanted to see this card, but I'm looking for the big prize here.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able. I at first was planning to, and then with the sort of all of my friends dropping out and not going, I was like, well, I guess I might not go. But now I just found out I have a family reunion like in the Dallas area, literally like 5 days before UFC 200 on July 4th. And I'm like, man, if I'm driving all the way out to Texas and it happens to be like 5 days before UFC 200, I might need to just belly up and drive an extra few hundred miles, an extra several hundred miles to Vegas. And even if I don't go to the event, because I think UFC 200 tickets are ridiculous, so I'm not sure if I would be able to go to the event, but it's always fun to just be in the atmosphere and soak it all in, and Fight Week, and seeing friends, seeing fighters. One cool thing is when you gamble in Vegas during Fight Week, especially at the MGM or wherever the fight's going down. There are a lot of fight fans around, so Jay and I are playing roulette, and this random guy we've never met in our lives, this Irish dude who was in Vegas to watch Conor fight Aldo, later turned into Minda as UFC 189. And the guy knew all, he was a smart smart mixed martial arts fan. It was just, cool talking about the sport and different fighters and, different belts and all that with just random people pretty much wherever you went. The Rogan show full of MMA fans. So it's definitely a fun experience. If you've never been to UFC, I don't know if I'd recommend going for 200 just because that's going to be such a shit show and there are going to be so many people there. But go for a Super Bowl weekend card, or go for like a New Year's card, or they do put on a lot of shows in Vegas, and I think I've been to Vegas 5 or 6 different weekends now since the first time I went at UFC 167, and I've always had a blast. So enough about Vegas. Let's get to this podcast. Sort of an odd podcast in a couple ways. The first being, usually we do it live. I say, call this number and call in, and people usually don't call in, but we get a lot of tweets. We get calls every now and then. Ustream is down today, which I won't give them shit because out of hundreds of episodes, this is, I think, the first time it was down. It just wouldn't get past the initializing screen. Wouldn't let me broadcast. So this is a canned episode. We'll throw it up right when it's done. But unfortunately, no live listeners, anything like that. So if anything does go crazy, we'll just edit it out and no one will know the wiser. Also a weird show because literally there was no news this weekend that didn't have to do with UFC 199 or this past weekend's card. I mean, bits and pieces. Ronda Rousey might not be back till 2017 due to a recent knee injury. Matt Mitrione's commission hearing was postponed. Just, very, very little as far as MMA news went. So we're pretty much only going to be talking about last weekend's card and this coming weekend's card. And I guess that brings us to it. Sunday, May 29th in Las Vegas, Nevada. A pretty underrated card. It was a Fox Sports 1 card. I watched all of it. A lot of times I'll just watch the main card, especially if it's, a Fox Sports 1 card or something like that. But especially the Aljamain Sterling fight had me tuning in early, unfortunately. Let's start with the prelims. Adam Milstead defeats Chris De La Rocha in a fight that I don't really think many people knew who either of these guys were. So good for the heavyweight Adam Milstead to, make a name for himself on UFC Fight Pass. The next fight, Brian Caraway defeats Aljamain Sterling. Aljo, one of my favorite fighters, just in the sense that, he's been on the show multiple times. He's a nice dude. We had him on when he was still in CFFC. Really nice guy. I still think he is a future champion. He's so young, and he's in an older division. I mean, you look at who's fighting for that 135 belt. Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber, guys who will both be retired in 5 years, unless something wild happens and they pull off a Randy Couture. So you have Sterling, a young guy who, along with Garbrandt and Almeida, really makes up the future of bantamweights, fighting Brian Caraway, who is a pretty sizable underdog here. Aljamain Sterling went out in the first round and dominated. On my card, got a 10-8. Unfortunately, on a lot of other people's and 2 of the judges' card, only was awarded a 10-9, even though he just grapple fucked the hell out of Caraway for the entire round. Basically, had him in a full Nelson, had him in chokes, just couldn't finish, and admitted after the fight that the reason he lost was because he burnt himself out in the first round going for finishes. Comes out in the second round tired, and Caraway was equipped to outpoint him in the second and third round. And on 2 of the judges' scorecards, it was ruled 29-28. I don't know how Adelaide Bird scored it 28-29 for Aljo, because as much as I like him, the only rounds 2 and 3 were definitive 10-9 Caraways. the fact that she gave one of those rounds to Sterling is insane. The only real question mark as far as scoring it was whether you gave the first round a 10-8 or a 10-9 to Sterling. So it was either going to be a draw. I was rooting for a draw. I scored it a 28-28 draw. But but it was scored to Caraway, and he earned it by winning 2 of those rounds. Eric Koch making a name for himself again, getting a win at lightweight, second round submission. Had a passionate post-fight speech reminding everyone that he, used to be a guy, pardon me, who was about to fight for the belt, and he's still that same fighter. Jake Collier, second round TKO. Abel Trujillo, a unanimous decision win against Jordan Rinaldi. And Sarah McMahon looking very dominant over Jessica Ai, winning that one unanimously, 30-27 across the board. What'd you make of these prelims, Pat?
There was some good action here and there. As you mentioned, to start things off, it was definitely an underrated fight card and a card that was flying under the radar as well. Some good names. I mean, really, Aljamain Sterling versus Brian Caraway being the second fight. Adam Milstead getting the second round TKO in the first fight. And then there was, for the majority of the fights from there was names. Abel Trujillo versus Jordan Rinaldi. I mean, Jordan Rinaldi, relatively unknown, but Trujillo a name. And then from there, McMahon versus I, and then the whole main card as well. There was, some good action, some good finishes there with Milstead getting the TKO. Koch, I had picked Campbell on the show, I want to say, just because Koch had been out for 2 years going into this fight. So, I thought there would be a little bit of ring rust there. Koch able to get the second round submission. Very, very pleased to see him because, he definitely was a talent that had a lot of hype coming on him. And then he took a couple hard L's there. And so very, very good to see him bounce back, get a nice finish in his return after such a long layoff. Collier showing some great heart getting that TKO in the second round. He was busted up by a big knee from Alberto Uda. I want to say it was in the first round. Uda more known for his submission prowess, but he was doing some good work in the clinch there, and caught Collier with a knee that just busted him up. Hit him with many heavy strikes in the first round, really, and I want to say a few in the second too. But then Collier never quit, hung in there, was pretty busted up, and still just came through and was able to get the finish. I think Uda might have gassed himself out there a little bit, so that was a good. Gutsy performance there, and there were some decent fights on the prelims. Sarah McMahon versus Jessica Ai, not my most favorite fight. That was pretty much pretty much what I'd come to expect if Sarah McMahon were to get the W, which is what happened. Just got a wrestling based decision. It was. Some good action there for the most part, save for the featured bout of the Fox Sports 1 prelims. I personally was hoping that Jessica Ai was going to be able to stall the takedown attempts of Sarah McMahon a little more there. Just use some of that takedown defense. I want to say she trains out of Stipe Miocic's camp there. I was hoping for a bit of that, but when you have the women's Olympic silver medalist in wrestling on you, that's hard to stop.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realize I was muted up there. I'll make sure to take it out in post. It's a good thing this is a canned episode. Let's get to the main card, which I don't know, man. A lot of talent, a lot of guys who got wins and are exciting fighters. Just on Sunday, didn't have the most exciting fight of their life. I vaguely remember the wins by Paul Felder, Lorenz Larkin, Chris Camozzi, and Rick Story. I know Larkin had some really impressive moments. Kamosi just smothered Vitor Miranda. Felder got a deserving unanimous decision against Berkman. Rick Story basically Rick Storied Tarek Saffiedine. I mean, usually when you have a good offensive grappler against a striker, you see the offensive grappler win, and that's just what Story did. All of these guys, earn the victories, and I don't want to knock them, but just a lot of snoozers. I don't know. What did you make of those first 4 fights?
Yeah, this was kind of an example of sometimes there'll be a card on paper that looks just like a bad card. You don't know any of the names. It's like a regional card, but you watch it and it ends up being exciting because every other fight is a finish, if not, 70% or 80% of the fights. And this is one of those cards, definitely very good on the name brand or the name recognition aspect. Really from top to bottom, at least for me, I thought it was a solid card for a random Sunday at Vegas.
I felt like this was a good card for like the hardcore fans because you had a lot of guys who the casual fan hasn't heard of, like an Aljamain Sterling, or an Abel Trujillo or a Paul Felder or a Jorge Masvidal, guys like a Stevens Barao matchup.
Yeah.
Fights that the mainstream might not necessarily appreciate, but the hardcore fans will get a kick out of.
Yeah, very true. Very true. The discerning eye could tell that this was, or at least slated to be on paper, should be a solid card. And I mean, there were some decent fights from what I recall. But yeah, you know what? Like I definitely thought we were going to have some more finishes than we did. I was seeing a lot more finishes. Maybe I was just thinking with my heart there, though. But yeah, I mean, after a while, there was like a string of at least 7 decisions in a row there. I want to say is what it was before the main event knockout. I'd have to go back and double check, but yeah, it just after a while you want to see it finish. I mean, honestly, if you're watching the fights, nobody wants to see a card with 7 decisions in a row. It's just combined with their pacing and the commercials that they just, same shit over and over. Oh boy. Yeah, it can get bad pretty quick. I mean, not the worst fights ever, but just my goodness, the string of decisions really didn't do any favors for this card.
No, it didn't. But then we got to Stevens Barao, which, yeah, definitely. I was scrolling down. I was like, this better have won fight of the night, and it did. Both guys getting awarded $50,000. A banger of a fight that Stevens ends up taking 29-28. Man, I know you're a big Heathen fan, so I'll let you cap it off for us. What did you think about Jeremy Stevens, a guy who, you look a couple years ago, everyone had written him off, and Barao was at the top of the world, and now just a short while later, you have Stevens defeating the Baron Renan Barao via unanimous decision.
Yeah. I mean, as far as decisions go, this was a fun fight. Renan Barao came out looking real good to start off. His movement was looking very good just overall with the feet. Seemed to have some decent head movement. He was really trying to work that speed, and it was working to a good end there. For the first round, he was making little Heathen swing and miss, and he was connecting with his own shots. But come the second round, I don't know if it was just Barao wearing down or Lil Heathen just getting some words of wisdom from his corner there, but that happens every now and then when he's down or he knows he's down, he knows he's losing. He just gets pissed and he comes out and just does not give any fucks, and that's really what he stopped doing in the second and third round. And he was able to fight his fight and really put some amazing shots. I mean, he landed so many uppercuts on Barao there, especially that flurry in the second round. I mean, how anybody could withstand those shots, that was just amazing, and really bodes well for Renan Barao moving up to 145, because he took huge shots from one of the heaviest hitters at 145. And a lot of people were kind of worrying about his chin, especially after the beatdowns. He took the 2 beatdowns from TJ Dillashaw at 135 pounds. So looks like he still has a chin about him. I mean, hey, who knows, though, after taking so many shots in this fight, that's not something you want to test on a fight-to-fight basis, really. But he did not look terrible. It was a close fight. That third round, I want to say, man, it was a hard, closely fought fight. But yeah, I thought it was a solid W for Lil Heathen for sure.
What do you think is next for Jeremy Stephens? Honestly, I probably should have asked that question after or before asking that. I should have thought about it myself. That's actually something I haven't even considered yet. But Stephens now, you look at his record. This Barao win is big. He just lost to Max Holloway, but Max is a guy who I think will likely be fighting for a title soon. So this moves Stephens up to 8. Unfortunately, he's already fought, I feel like, everyone toward the top of 145. He's fought Cub, he's fought Oliveira, who are the 2 guys directly above him. He hasn't fought Ricardo Lamas. I think Max Holloway fights Ricardo Lamas this weekend, at UFC 199. So they're both tied up. Do you give Jeremy Stephens, I don't know, the loser of Aldo Edgar, maybe? And, have that be his next big test? Because I guess that'll be UFC 200, so that might work out. I'm sure Stephens isn't going to pop back, that soon after fighting 15 minutes against Renan Barao. But yeah, if I'm playing the role of Sean Shelby, I'll give him the loser of Aldo Edgar.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a pretty fair call there.
Ooh, what about Chad Mendes? Is he fighting anyone currently?
You know what? Not to my recollection. Yeah, Chad Mendes. Gosh, he is coming off that first round TKO against Edgar. Has not fought since then. That would be a solid fight there. Or, you could give him the winner of Holloway and Lamas this weekend.
I don't know if I want to see Stephens versus Max too. Max kind of just danced circles around him.
Yeah, he really did.
Like a jabroni.
Yeah, he put on an expert showing in that fight. But if Lamas were to win that fight, heck, even if Lamas were to lose that fight, in a weight class like 145 pounds, where again, Holloway won 8 fights in a row and is not getting a title shot. I think this is Little Heathen's first win, I want to say. I think he's actually just coming off of the Holloway loss there. So yeah, he's got a few more fights to go. There's a lot of different things I could see them doing with the Little Heathen after this one. All big and exciting, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. That brings us to the main event. Everyone was picking Thomas Almeida, including, we both got the upset on the co-main event correct, and we both went for the favorite Thomas Almeida in the main event, and we were both wrong there. Cody Garbrandt, it just took him about half a round to KO Thomas Almeida, sort of, just waited on him and then tagged him once he came in and had him up against the fence after rocking him and dropped him. And man, it was a beautiful fight. Garbrandt gets the win. Before we, I guess the logical question now is who do you match him up against next? He's 7th now at bantamweight. Man, that was a hell of an exciting fight.
Yeah, that really was a great performance. Cody Garbrandt, he said a little bit, Almeida's got a padded record. He's fought the better competition. I thought it was pretty close going into that fight, but man, Garbrandt definitely came out and made a statement with those hands and his boxing, staying in the pocket and just putting those combos on Thomas Almeida. It was a devastating performance. It was a great show. He's got to be close to the title. I mean, I could see him going up against. I mean, I'd love to see him fight Mayday McDonald. Talk about two of the best, heaviest hitting boxers in the 135-pound division. Him versus Michael Mayday McDonald, I think, would be an excellent fight. I don't recall if McDonald has a fight scheduled. I want to say he probably does. He's certainly got to be due up for a high-level opponent, though. I mean, taking out a guy who's 21-0, who had some big fights and some big knockouts himself. He's got a lot of shine on him right now, so I definitely see him getting, I mean, if not a number one contender shot in his next fight, maybe one or two fights, and he's close to title contendership, I'd say.
Yeah, and man, I really did not expect him winning. It's against a guy like Thomas Almeida, who versus the opponents he was getting much better wins against more high quality opponents, but I guess it shows you MMA math doesn't always work out exactly, and Cody Garbrandt was the better fighter on Sunday. I guess let's just move on to UFC 199. It's going to be a short show. It's weird, isn't live, no real news to talk about. But let's get to the fight going down in Inglewood. Yeah, I don't know. Just a really weak week. There were no fight announcements. I was actually looking a little bit more. We could play a couple clips from today's presser, but honestly, there were so many clips. I would just suggest you go to the UFC or the UFC on Fox YouTube and watch them for yourselves. It was a pretty funny presser to watch because both guys in both fights, the main event and co-main event, had a lot of back and forth to spit at each other. Let's start with the prelims. The UFC Fight Pass prelims aren't really doing anything for me until we got the welterweight fight between Sean Strickland and Tom Breeze. That should be fun. Cole Miller versus Alex Caceres, a fight that originally was supposed to be BJ Penn against Dennis Seaver. Seaver gets removed because of an injury. Miller subs in, and then Penn has that IV issue with USADA, and Alex Caceres subs in for him. A decent strawweight fight between Jessica Penne and Jessica Andrade. A lightweight match between Beneil Dariush and James Vick. This is a sick fight, actually. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Beneil Dariush, a lightweight that not many people talk about, but the dude is just deadly on the ground. Had a 5-fight win streak going, including wins against guys like, Cruikshank, Jim Miller, Michael Johnson, good fighters before losing to Michael Chiesa via rear naked choke. Going up against James Vick, still undefeated. One of the few undefeated fighters in the UFC, 9-0 Will the O go against Beneil Dariush? I haven't checked the odds yet. Let me pull them up. I would assume Dariush is a favorite. Yeah, he's minus 200. In the other fights, Pinay minus 145, Miller minus 185, Breeze minus 145 in those fights I mentioned. The last fight on the prelims being Brian Ortega against Clay Guida. This, another fight that is, if nothing else, sure to be fun. Another guy who doesn't have a loss on his record, even though he did test positive against Mike De La Torre. It was ruled a no contest. So technically still 10-0 going up against a guy who, if nothing else, will always be known as a banger in Clay Guida. He's 3-5 in his last 8. Might be looking at walking papers if he cannot defeat Brian Ortega, who's a pretty staunch minus 275 favorite. What do you make of those prelims, Pat?
Yeah, you know what? I definitely like a lot of the matchups we're looking at here for UFC 199. Sean Strickland versus Tom Breeze, two big strikers there, welterweight, pretty large for the division. I like Strickland, young new talent. Tom Breeze, very talented. I want to say he's from the UK, but training out of Jackson's MMA, if I'm not mistaken. Supposed to be a pretty highly touted prospect there. Kevin King Casey versus Elvis Mutapchik. Not too familiar with Poyo Reyes or Dong Hyun Kim 2, nor Jonathan Wilson.
I was going to say, when you see Dong Young Kim fighting on Fight Pass at lightweight, not the same Dong Young Kim. I think they fight in the same camp, but it's a different guy. Don't worry. Just
no
the same
way.
name.
Are they out of the same camp?
I think they might be. I think he may be. I'm not sure, but one is Maestro, one is Stun Gun. This is Maestro. This isn't the Stun Gun.
Okay. Yeah, let's see here, and then for the Fox Sports 1 preliminary portion there, Miller and Caceres, that should be good. I'm thinking Cole Miller is a solid and definite well-deserved favorite at 145 there. He's bigger, he's longer. I feel like he's probably just a little bit more polished everywhere compared to Caceres, on the ground and on the feet. Pinay versus Andrade, as you mentioned, definitely going to be a good fight at 115. It'll be interesting to see Andrade. She was fighting at the women's bantamweight division, so a full 20-pound cut. It's going to be really interesting to see how she's looking on the scales come tomorrow afternoon. That should be a solid scrap, though. And as you mentioned, Dariush, certainly an underrated fighter, as is Vic. Definitely, as you mentioned, he was coming off I believe it was Tough 15, the Tough Live season. And, yeah, undefeated fighter, had multiple finishes in the UFC. I want to say he's 4-0 in the UFC right now. But yeah, I'm definitely very much looking forward to that one. Or no, he's actually 5-0 in the UFC right now as James Vick, with 2 guillotine submissions, 3 decision victories. I mean, that's some great ring experience there, and has shown that he can get the finish at times. Man, he's certainly going to need that well-roundedness against Beneil Dariush, because Dariush, as you mentioned, more of a grappler, but he has been putting his striking together much better as of late. So should be a solid one. I may be leaning towards another dog there in James Vick. And then Brian Ortega versus Clay Guida. Not a fight I'm really too excited about. I feel this one is guaranteed to go to a decision. Most fights with Clay Guida are, unless somebody knocks him out, which I don't think Ortega's going to do. because Clay Guida he's bouncing around like a ball in a pinball machine, man. And it does not make for an exciting fight. I can't recall the last time I saw a Clay Guida fight that I was super stoked about, unless it was one where he was like getting knocked out or submitted. And he's just so elusive these days. It just seems like it's even hard to catch him. So if I'm being honest, not my most favorite fight right there. I'm hoping T City Ortega gets some manner of finish in there, but honestly, I don't even know if he'll be able to, and really, I don't even know if he'll be able to beat Clay Guida. I mean, Guida's one of those guys. Man, he's, you think of him as a perennial gatekeeper, but every now and then, he sneaks in these wins that you do not expect him to sneak in. And I could see T City definitely being one of those wins. I mean, Clay Guida has probably fought more years in the UFC than Brian Ortega has fights. And his UFC experience overall certainly can't be discounted. So not necessarily super stoked on this one, but would not be shocked if Guida was able to pull something out here.
Guida, a guy who I think deservingly is a big underdog at plus 235, but at the same time, if there is any fighter who can pull an upset win, I'd probably put Brian Barberena at the top of the list. But Guida is up there. He has scored a lot of upsets. I mean, this is a guy who beat Rafael dos Anjos and Anthony Pettis. He grabs wins here and there. Let's see if he'll be able to do it against T City. That brings us to the main card, Dustin Poirier versus Bobby Green. Green was on a crazy 8-fight win streak dating back to Strikeforce before losing to Edson Barboza. And that was November 2014. He hasn't fought since. It's almost been 2 years. Dustin Poirier has been very active. Fought a couple times 2014, a couple times 2015. He fought January 2016, defeating Joseph Duffy at UFC 195. He's strung together a 3-fight winning streak since losing to Conor McGregor at UFC 178. Fights against Carlos Ferreira and Yancy Medeiros. Both of those first round TKOs. And the unanimous decision against Duffy. Both of these guys are similar. They're sharp standing up. I mean, they both are fast. They're both athletes. They both can clip you and drop you. And if it goes to the mat, neither one is necessarily a black belt or a wrestling ace, but they both can pull off some slick subs. They are dangerous, both standing up and on the mat. And for no other reason than Poirier has just been more active. I'm gonna have that be my tiebreaker here. I feel like they're very, very similar, and usually the coin flip I do, if it's exactly 50-50 and I'm not sure which way to lean, I think, all right, what has each fighter been doing recently? Green hasn't fought since 2014. Like I said, in about a year and a half. Poirier fought 5 months ago. So, and since, since Green last fought, has fought 3 fights, won them all. Poirier, a minus 220 favorite in Vegas. Green on the backside at plus 180. Who are you taking here?
Man, this is another one that I was really thinking underdog myself here. Bobby Green was, I don't even remember what the line was looking like. I want to say like a plus 160 or something last time I checked. Underdog against Dustin Poirier. And I said, man, I just don't know. I think Bobby Green, he's quicker. I think, he has not fought in a long time, but man, he has done some good things inside that octagon. And Dustin Poirier, for whatever reason it is, I'm not entirely sold on him at 155 pounds. He's looked pretty good thus far. I mean, his fight with Duffy, though, that was back and forth. I mean, he he got his ass kicked pretty good. As much as, I mean, he won that fight and deservedly so, but he definitely took some lumps in that fight as well. And Bobby Green, I just think when he's on, he's very on. He's had a lot to go through. I want to say his brother was killed in a drive-by a couple years ago, and who knows, dealing with that whole tragedy, I can only imagine that would be something to throw you off your game come fight night. I mean, to say the least. So who knows, maybe after a couple years out, he's been able to regain his focus here, and I mean, he's beaten some top fighters at 155 pounds, and I'm not super sold that Dustin Poirier is one of the top fighters at 155 pounds. He's been making his case lately, but if he's able to get past Bobby Green on Saturday night, I say he's definitely well on the way to being a top fighter at 155 pounds.
And I do want to apologize in advance to my Louisiana friends, notably Alan at Westland Eagle AH and Hunter at Hero Shinwoo, who I'm sure are going to text me sometime this week and say, dude, you keep saying Dustin Poirier's name wrong on the podcast. What the fuck? I think it's actually like Poirier. Or I don't know. I have a friend named Chris who his last name was spelled the exact same as Dustin's, and he pronounced it Poyer. So I'm sorry, it's just ingrained in my head, and I'll probably do that until the day I die. Moving on, two guys whose names I can pronounce fine: Dan Henderson and Hector Lombard. Man, imagine if this fight went down like 6 or 7 years ago. How badass would that have been? Like, you have Lombard, who around the same time, 2009, 2010, was just blasting everyone in Bellator, and Hendo went on that crazy streak around the same time, 2009, 2010, destroyed Bisping at UFC 100, TKO'd Fedor. Had that crazy UFC 139 fight against Shogun. Imagine if we got this fight 5 years ago. Would have been amazing. It's still going to be a fun fight, but I think Hendo especially is not the same fighter. Lombard himself is getting older. He is 38. We all talk about Dan's age here, and yes, Dan is 45 years old. I repeat, 45. Lombard getting up there too. This is a fight where whether it went down today, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, shit, both of these guys are so old, maybe even 40 years ago. They both can put you out with one punch. They are absolute knockout artists. And here, let's see the amount of knockouts on Hendo's record, 15. The amount of knockouts on Lombard's, 19. Yeah, combined, what is that, 34 knockouts. Both of them knockout artists, but I think Dan's chin has wilted a little bit, looking, back at his last 8 fights. He's 2-6. He just got KO'd by Vitor. Gegard TKO'd him last year. You have Lombard, who's coming off a suspension. Actually, no, he fought since. He fought Neil Magny and lost. Yeah, just a few months ago, and now is moving back up to 85, which I think is smart. I think he was a little bit drawn out at 70. Moving back up to 85 to fight Hendo, and I think this fight is all Lombard's, and I think Vegas reflects that, giving him minus 420 odds against Henderson, who's plus 335. So I wish I had the nuts to pick Hendo here, but I'm going with the safe bet. I'm going with Hector Lombard. What about you, Pat?
Jake, as much as it pains me to do it, I'm going to have to join you in taking the safe bet as well here in Hector Lombard. I mean, Henderson has been my dude for forever. I mean, for the better part of the last decade. Just always been a huge fan of Dan Henderson, and um, even up until 2012, maybe 2013, he was still hanging in there with some of the best of the very best. I mean, in all weight classes. It's only as of late. I mean, as you mentioned, 2-6 in his last 8. Granted, a couple of those were fights that were kind of, the Lyoto Machida fight that one could have potentially gone his way. There were a couple interesting ones in there. Could have easily been 4-4, as opposed to 2-6, but two of those brutal TKOs, almost identical TKOs, from Vitor Belfort in their second and third meetings. And yeah, the prompt and swift TKO by Gegard Mousasi. Things have not been going Dan Henderson's way in the octagon. The brutalizing he took from the hands of Daniel Cormier, nobody has put it on Dan Henderson like that. And Hector Lombard, he's shorter. He doesn't have the reach. They both are similarly high-level grapplers, but Lombard is younger. He hasn't had nearly as many savage TKOs as Dan Henderson has. And Dan Henderson is the man who years ago we were talking about is the jaw of legend. I mean, it was only a couple of years ago you couldn't even TKO Dan Henderson. That was, wasn't even a thought. But Hector Lombard, seemingly would have the jaw in his favor. He's got the speed in his favor. He's just got to get inside and land, and you would think he'd be able to do that pretty quick against the older, slower Dan Henderson. Of course, strength is the last thing to go, though, and Dan Henderson has that in spades. So who knows? Maybe if he can keep the shorter man at bay, use that reach to his advantage, he's certainly got a shot here. But, man, I'm going to go with what is perceived as the smart money on Hector Lombard, and hey, if I'm wrong, then that's great. That's just a bonus, since it's a win for Hendo.
The last fight before the co-main and the main, the two title fights, Max Holloway versus Ricardo Lamas. Max Holloway, I think I mentioned the stat to you before the show went. This is the first time any guy has ever won 8 fights in a row without being awarded a title shot. And it's crazy because Max might need to do 10. Winning this fight won't lock him up a title shot because 145 is just turned into such a logjam with Conor McGregor. Not sure whether he's a featherweight, not sure whether he's even a mixed martial artist. What weight class and what sport his next fight will take place at is completely unknown. So Conor's kind of holding up the whole division. I wouldn't be shocked if the UFC just made Edgar versus Aldo the undisputed championship. I mean, if you have Conor talking about fighting Floyd before fighting for the belt he holds. And this coming after a jaunt up to welterweight, I don't think it would be that outside, that crazy to strip him of the belt. But that aside, you have Holloway who's going to fight Ricardo Lamas, and I guess winning this fight would put Holloway second at the division to the winner of Aldo versus Edgar. Man, I have just a weird upset itch here, but I'm not going to scratch it. Just there's too much going in Holloway's favor. The guy can perform on the mat. He has great defensive wrestling, great balance, and he's one of these few guys who is just a real elite striker, like up there with the Cruzes and McGregors and Dillashaws. Just the way Max moves is so fluid, and God, the guy's so damn young. He's 24. This is the future of the featherweights, if not the future of the UFC. You know, the guy doesn't really run his mouth, but for what he's been able to do at his age, I mean, 24, it's unreal. I can't remember someone this young making such waves since John Jones. You know, like I said, he's on an 8-fight winning streak since losing to Conor McGregor back in Boston in 2013. His last, 4 or 5 wins have all been very impressive wins, versus very impressive opponents. He finishes Cub Swanson, finishes Charles Oliveira, gets a very lopsided decision against Jeremy Stevens. Everything's pointing to him just, getting either a unanimous decision or a finish over Lamas. So I'm not going to scratch that itch I'm feeling, and I'm just feeling a weird itch that Lamas with, he has some good wins too. He's really in his last 10 fights, 9 fights, only lost to Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes, 2 elite guys. He's also finished Cub Swanson. He's finished Eric Koch, who's now a lightweight. He subbed out Dennis Bermudez, beat Diego Sanchez. And Diego, even though he's taken a lot of L's, never an easy fight. I think he'll give Holloway moments where Holloway will really need to scramble. But like I said, I'm not going to scratch that itch. I'm not going to go with the upset. I'm going to go with the sure thing. Max Holloway sitting minus 335 in Vegas. I will be going with the blessed one, or blessed, or whatever the fuck his nickname is, Max Holloway.
Yeah, you know what? With the momentum, the way that it is right now, I think you certainly have to go with Max. I mean, Ricardo Lamas, he's definitely been a top contender for some time at the 145-pound weight class. He's been around since the WEC days. Really came into his own, though, in the UFC days. Had a solid victory over Diego Sanchez in November, and has been laying low since then. Was finished by Chad Mendes, but he's really only lost to the best in the division. Again, since coming over to the UFC, he's only lost to Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes, who, next to Conor McGregor, arguably are, 2 and 3 in the division. You can easily make the argument that Ricardo Lamas is a top 5 talent. And he's beaten some good names. Max Holloway, though, my goodness. I mean, the fight with Oliveira, that was kind of the freakish neck injury. I really wish that one would have gone the whole way, just because Oliveira has been looking so good himself lately, and they're very similar, very lengthy. Both have great striking and great submission. I just thought that would have been a fantastic fight if it would have been able to just go a little bit longer there. But I still dare say, in spite of the win streak, I think Ricardo Lamas has still faced some of the tougher opposition in the UFC. Ricardo Lamas beat Dennis Bermudez, who Max Holloway lost to. Granted that was some time ago and many fights ago, and Max Holloway is young and has just been improving so much over the years. This one is really a really tough one to call. And Jake, I can see why your upset radar is going off a little bit here. It seems like Ricardo is being discounted. And not really being given the props he's due as a top tier mixed martial artist, that which I believe he is. And I think Lamas is going to be able to get the job done here. I think I will go with the upset. Max, man, he's really got to use that distance. He's got to use that distance because if he misses with those long limbs, man, I'm thinking Lamas is going to try and plan him. He's going to try and work that ground game, and I think he's a crafty enough veteran to make it work. I think Lamas is just going to be all over Max Holloway. It's going to be pressure all night, and I think Lamas strings together 2 in a row, and I think he's going to get a UD from Max Holloway. Who knows? Maybe even a late submission, folks. I don't know why. I'm feeling it.
Ooh, feeling a late sub from P Money. Man, I didn't want to keep this podcast under an hour, but we are rolling up into the co-main and main events, and man, all 4 of these guys: Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber, Luke Rockhold, and Michael Bisping. They may be different as fighters, but all 4 of these guys have sold their shit out of this fight. And I'm so tired of seeing opponents just going, yeah, I'm really looking in I really respect my opponent, and I'm looking to step in there, and we're just gonna have a really respectful fight, and when it's all over, I'm taking his family to Applebee's, and we're all just gonna have a splendid time. I'm gonna buy him a bloomin' onion. I just love this guy. That's not what I want to hear before a fight. I want to hear some vitriol. I want to hear some meanness. And Cruz, Faber, Rockhold, and Bisping have all brought it. Dana should give them all bonuses just for the fact that they have all sold the shit out of this fight. I actually have 60-second little clips from the presser, thanks to the UFC on Fox YouTube channel, that I want to play before we break down each fight. The first of which being Cruz, Faber. Let it be a little prologue to us breaking down the fight. This is Cruz Faber 3 for the UFC Bantamweight title.
You keep talking about my losses. You haven't fought one of the guys that I've lost to, and you go to a decision every time. It's a coin toss.
I haven't fought the guys you're.
I have friends. I have friends that have built.
He hasn't been your friend for a while, and you still moved out of the division to dodge.
What do you care about my life so much? Why don't you mind your own
business? The I'm trying to make is, if you're so good, why didn't you?
You're sitting at home injured, just thinking about me. You're like a stage 5 clinger. Thank God you're not a girl.
You won't fight your own teammates. I'll fight anybody. I am healthy. I'm right here. I'm right here, and I'm healthy.
You fought 3 guys in the last 4 years.
So what? I beat them all. While I was out, and I came back and get the belt while you were competing. That's sad, man.
Notice he's not saying touch the belt. He perved out on Fox Sports 1 the other day. Watch that with Garbrandt.
Like this.
He keeps talking about how he's been touching the belt.
He's like a little kid.
Sort of pervert.
That's why he's a
California kid. Pick up the belt like a man.
It in front of you like a man while you couldn't reach it. You're going to be reaching for it with your T-Rex arms.
He's got an inch and a half on me, Mr. Stilts over here.
I'll bring a soapbox for you to talk on when we weigh in, all right? That way you can look at me in the eyes like a man.
I'm the perfect height. Don't worry about that.
You have nothing but excuses, and you're going to have more excuses after I beat you tomorrow.
Sweet. Not going to happen. It's Saturday anyways. Yeah, I know you're nervous.
Saturday.
Big time heat going down between Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber. Dominic Cruz, I mean, you want to look at it, you want to talk about your pound-for-pound greatest fighters currently. Yes, I do agree. John Jones and Demetrius Johnson are at the top of the heap. But Dominic Cruz, this man has not lost a fight in about a decade, and it's the only fight he's ever lost. And he's looking to avenge that fight for a second time on Saturday. He's 21-1. His only loss is to Uriah Faber in 2007. A win Saturday would close the book on the Faber-Cruz rivalry. The first fight, Faber guillotine chokes out Cruz in the first round. The second fight, was close, but Cruz did deserve that decision. Third time around. I mean, this is really Cruz looking. I mean, shit. How great would Cruz versus Johnson 2 be? Cruz is sort of the one red mark on Johnson's record, like Faber is to Cruz. That's a whole nother issue. But we have Cruz Faber 3 this Saturday, and man, you look at the odds. Cruz is minus 450. I do think that is pretty out there. Man, I would pick the underdog here, but just how good has Dominic Cruz looked since coming back from a big layoff, and I would say a big injury. Let's talk about 3 big injuries. Needs 2 major surgeries on his knee, then tears his groin. I mean, there's almost no injury that the guy hasn't gone through. Had about 3 years off between Mighty Mouse and Mizugaki, another 1.5 years off between Mizugaki and Dillashaw, and now only a 5-month layoff between winning the belt and now fighting Uriah Faber, a guy who's just been active his entire career. Looking back, I don't see a year where he hasn't fought multiple times. This is going to be an interesting fight. Like I said, I think Faber will have his chances, but Cruz has just looked so dominant, and I really think deserves to be called the number 3 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So I have Cruz unanimous decision. We'll call it 49-46, holding the belt, and we'll see who gets the next crack.
Man, well, for myself, I'm thinking this fight certainly is a coin flip, although as far as avenging losses and stuff like that, I must say that Dominic Cruz has, before the Johnny Hendricks fight, what I used to refer to as the GSP standard of record, where GSP had 2 losses on his record, but after he was defeated by those people, he later came back and whooped that ass and was able to even up and avenge every loss he ever had on his record.
Against Hughes and Serra, yeah.
Yes, and that was what Dominic Cruz was able to do. As you mentioned, only the 1 loss on his record, only 1. And he was able to come back 4 or 5 years later after that loss, and he was able to avenge it, and he was able to get the unanimous decision victory. And just by virtue of his body of work at the 135-pound weight class in the UFC and WEC, I mean, my goodness, I definitely always, for years, have regarded him as one of the best fighters in the game. I mean, you look at that, the record just speaks to a standard of excellence there. Now, he has had the injuries, he has had the layoffs, but it seems like, I mean, he was able to beat TJ Dillashaw while kind of injuring himself in the ring in the middle of what was the 4th round, or no, actually, that was an injury he'd actually went into the fight with and just exacerbated as the course of the fight went on, and was still able to beat TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw, who I would dare say moves better, strikes better, does many things better than Uriah Faber. Now, of course, Uriah Faber does have the lower center of gravity compared to TJ Dillashaw. He's going to be giving Dominic Cruz different looks, but then again, these aren't necessarily different looks because these are looks that Dominic Cruz has been seeing for years, not just in the cage, but certainly while studying for Uriah Faber. So, even though Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz have not met since Uriah linked up with Dwayne Ludwig and really revamped the whole Team Alpha Male camp, they have not squared it off since then. And Uriah Faber still has gotten better over the years. Even so many years deep into his career, he continues to get better. But I just don't know that it'll still be enough against Dominic Cruz. I think Cruz is still looking very well in spite of the layoffs, the ring rust, in spite of barely being able to walk in the 4th round in his last fight. I think that he's come through the worst of his injuries. I think he's going to be able to maintain a level of fairly frequent activity here, and I think he's going to go 2-1 versus Uriah Faber, and Dominic Cruz will retain the UFC Bantamweight Championship.
Yeah, you know, I want to lean Faber here. Faber is, you know, Faber's the fighter who got me into mixed martial arts as a freshman in college in like 07, 08. Seeing him on the Versus channel just bulldoze everyone. I was like, who is this guy and what is this sport and what is going on here? You know, I'm not an MMA lifer. I you know, wasn't. I wish I would have been into it during the Pride era, but you know, I really didn't get into it until about 9 years ago. And yeah, seeing guys like Faber just wreck house, I'm like, who is this motherfucker? I want to go Faber, but I mean, Cruz is just another fucking step above. And yes, he hasn't fought Faber since the Ludwig era happened, but he has fought Dillashaw, and I think he deserved to win that fight against TJ. I think it was very close, but I also scored at 48-47 Cruz. But yeah, man, how good would it be if we could see, you know, it seems like every quote unquote super fight that has ever been thought up, it never happens. Whether we're talking George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, whether we're talking John Jones versus Kane back when Kane was champ, Weidman Jones, just every potential super fight we've thrown around, it just never, ever, ever seems to materialize. If we could see Dominic Cruz versus Demetrius Johnson 2, and neither guy took an L between now and then, that would be the biggest fight in UFC history. Would it not? I mean, how great would a fight would that be? That would be a fight that unfortunately probably wouldn't break any pay-per-view records, but if you are a hardcore and you follow the fan, you will appreciate that. At least in my eyes, I think if you made that fight today, that would be the greatest MMA fight of all time. Do you agree?
I mean, that is certainly a fantastic angle that you could work there. Yeah, you know what? I mean,
put you on the spot.
Yeah, I could see how you can make that argument. I mean, certainly Demetrius Johnson being the only UFC flyweight champion that there's ever been. Dominic Cruz, I mean, and you know what I must say, even though you did not join up in the Pride days, still the WEC days, that's still a thing in and of itself. WEC never die.
I was so bummed when Mike Thomas Brown beat Faber.
Oh man, MTB, that was amazing. And well, I could go on and on about the WC days. Oh my goodness, their second fight when Faber was fighting just throwing elbows. Oh my gosh, because he broke both of his hands. That was just a nutty fight. But yeah, I mean, you know, Cruz held the championship since the WEC, brought it over to the UFC, defended it, never lost the belt. I mean, really, if he never got injured, I mean, you know, who's to say he would have been, or who's to say he wouldn't have been the only UFC bantamweight champion that there's ever been, taking on the only UFC flyweight champion that there's ever been. I mean, really, if you even want to, you could even say Dominic Cruz is the only UFC champion ever. I mean, really, you could just say this is interim. This is all interim stuff, kids stuff. You know, they were playing that belt. Barao and Dillashaw were passing back and forth. I mean, that was just that was the play belt for while Dominic Cruz was gone, holding the real belt, the only UFC bantamweight belt. So I mean, I could certainly see them marketing that one up quite a bit. Yeah, that the only problem is I just don't think that fight, no matter how much you try to hype it up, man, I don't know that it would live up to the billing. That's just, I feel like that would be a super hard fight to get the casuals up for, especially if anybody recalls their first fight, as good as Demetrius Johnson is. I really don't have any reason to think that a second fight between him and Dominic Cruz would go any different than their first one, with Dominic just suplexing Mighty Mouse around the octagon. So I think it would be kind of hard to build it up, although there certainly is a great amount of storyline there, and hey, certainly a fight I would not mind watching. I think Mighty Mouse has a few more competitors to go before he completely cleans out the division.
Wilson Rees.
I mean, Wilson Hayes. Hey, you never know.
Honestly, I think Mighty Mouse has evolved so much since then. He's so fast. I actually would pick Mighty Mouse in a fight between Cruz and him, but
Really?
I would. But that's a whole another issue. I hope we see the fight eventually. Let's get to Rockhold Bisping so we can put a bow on this thing. And just like Cruz and Faber, neither of these guys held back at the presser.
Put yourself out there, you believe it, and you achieve it. And that's what I do. I know what I'm going to do. I know that I'm better than this.
Sounds like
I
the
know
worst
that I'm going to knock
book
him out.
you've ever read. Conceive, believe, achieve. Shut the up. I'm also man enough to go after the guy that beat me on 2 weeks' notice, okay? And that says something about the size of my balls compared to you turning down Jacare when you've had a full camp. What the man? He didn't want it. He chose me. He chose. That's a real good way of saying I turned it down. I chose you. So you didn't choose Jacare. Thought you were the big dog.
I was waiting.
Thought you were the big swinging dick, man. You're the best in the
out
world, buddy.
You're just an average bloke.
Good use of English
I'm a fucking samurai. I'm going to come in there silent, undetected, and I'm going to knock you out. I'm going to make my kill, and I'm going to fucking be out.
You're making a
I'll be
fool
out
of
on the
yourself.
next contract. Watch me.
I get to walk
gonna
in
be a short
on 2
night for
weeks'
you.
notice. I get to punch him in the face and become world champion at the same time. I am a happy man. Believe you me. Look at you. You're not going to look so smug on Sunday, pal.
Hey.
When you're going back to the rest of your teammates that lost the belts.
Come forward and try.
You're all going to lose, AK, or all going to lose all the
try.
belts. So fuck you.
Bisping, I'm going to close both those eyes for you. I don't need a knee. I don't need to walk. I'll crawl in that cage.
Stop telling everybody
and
about
I'll
your
still
injuries then.
whoop your ass.
I'm going to take it from you on Saturday night, mate. I'm going to meet you in the center
Come
of the octagon.
give me everything
I'm
you
gonna back you up
got.
against the fence. I'm going to smash
You're
your pretty
going
little
to
face
come
in,
forward
boy.
and you're going to fall face down.
Lots of smack talk there. We talked a couple weeks ago when Bisping filled in. We did a topic. Does Michael Bisping have a chance to beat Luke Rockhold? And we both said no. And the reason we both said no is obvious. Luke Rockhold is bigger. Luke Rockhold is stronger. Luke Rockhold is faster. Luke Rockhold is a better striker. Luke Rockhold has better punches. Luke Rockhold has better kicks. Luke Rockhold is probably a better wrestler. Luke Rockhold has better grappling. Luke Rockhold has better jiu-jitsu. Luke Rockhold has better submissions. But there's one thing I've noticed, and I've gotten the itch. This isn't the same itch as the Lamas itch, where I'm seeing a guy with good wins, but this is an itch I get when I see a overconfident champion, and I got this itch for Rousey Holm. And I saw Rousey doing all these things, and she's saying, "Oh, and I'm gonna do this movie after the Holm fight, and I do respect Holm, but she has no chance against me." And then Rousey cooked up a bunch of drama at the weigh-ins by locking up Holm's arm and getting in a tussle with her. And I got that feeling during Rousey Holm. I got that feeling during McGregor Diaz, where Diaz seemed to be locked in on the fight. Like, dude, let's fucking fight. I'm fucking ready. And Connor's talking about eating 12 breakfasts and wearing his suit and having a fun time, and just these overconfident champions that seem to buy into their own hype. Long story short, I got that itch again. Michael Bisping, first round knockout. Pat?
Oh, I'm just completely flabbergasted here. Well, I must say, when this fight was initially announced, I did say that if Michael Bisping puts on a fight like the kind that he had against Anderson Silva, he's got a chance, because that was the best Bisping I recall seeing in a decade at least.
He has. I mean, mentally, I feel like Bisping has handled everything perfectly. So far, you know, the
oh yeah,
he's, man, I feel silly as hell for picking a guy who's plus 600 on some sports books. William Hill has him at plus 600. It might be silly, but dude, I'm just feeling a Bisping finish, and it sure as fuck won't be a sub if it's a finish. It'll be a KO.
Oh yeah, it would have to be. It would have to be. But yeah, I mean, really, Bisping, as I said before, if it weren't for that gaffe where he just completely stopped defending himself and started looking to the referee for a timeout instead of concentrating on his opponent and waiting for the referee to break up the action like he should have, he would not have taken a huge majority of the damage he took in the Anderson Silva fight, and probably would have made a more convincing decision, because I know there are people that watch that fight and they still say, oh man, Anderson Silva won that fight. And just a lot of people really aren't sold on the legitimacy of Michael Bisping getting the W in that one. I think if Michael Bisping just keeps his head on a swivel like it was in that Silva fight, and, you know, doesn't have one of those lapses like he did, you know, just keeps his head in the game, nose to the grindstone, 25 minutes, he has a shot. He has a shot in this one. Man, you know, he's had legitimate wrestling chops ever since. You know, he fought Rashad Evans to a draw when Rashad Evans was on his way to being the UFC light heavyweight champion. He's been right there with some of the top contenders, and has been since he broke into the UFC. Oh man, as far as actually picking him though, Jake, you're a more brave man than I. I think I'm rolling with Rockhold here in this one. The Cali boys are sticking together. NorCal and SoCal, we're linking up. I mean, Rockhold already has a solid W over Michael Bisping. Even if Bisping plays that perfect game, he's still got a lot to contend with. And I think Luke Rockhold, in Bisping's best case scenario, takes him to a decision. Worst case scenario, he comes out and snuffs Bisping as quick or quicker than even before. So be that as it may, I'm not discounting Bisping. I'm not putting him at a plus 600 whatsoever. But I'm not rushing to pick him. I have to take Rockhold in this one.
Man, the takes are so hot on the MMA Podcast 172. They called the fire department on us. We got to shut shit down as soon as possible. We appreciate you tuning in. Shut up, Pat. You have anything for the people before we sign off?
Oh, Big Jake, it's always a pleasure getting together, doing this damn thing we call the MMA Podcast with you, breaking down the fights, talking about the anticipated matchups. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to doing it with you again next week. We will do our best to get these live issues resolved and be bringing the live aspect back to the people, a little more fan interactivity as they always like it. But damn it, it was fun just the same, and can't wait to see you next week, brother.
Indeed, yeah, we actually might be looking to switch over from Ustream to YouTube just to get around the ads and everything that Ustream has. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we will be back next week. Enjoy UFC 199. Enjoy the weekend. We love you. Until then, we out.
The MMA Podcast, throw a high kick, but I blocked that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. What you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA Podcast. throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me DS, screaming George, where you at? I pump the strap, and you know that I won't tap. Mystery, the MMA Podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shout out to Jake. Shout out to Jake.